Welcome to the Legacy and Light podcast, where we are creating a culture of community by sharing stories of what God has done. I'm Allie Maddox, your host for today's episode. And today we have Teresa Young.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Glad to be here.
Tell us, where would people see you around church?
So I go to the 9:30 service in the traditional sanctuary. I sing in the choir as well.
Nice.
So a lot of people will tell me that they've seen me on TV, which is crazy because it's usually 3 or 4 weeks after we've actually sung the songs. And I'm in a life group at 11 o'clock with Kelly and Bruce Fellers that I absolutely love. So I'm all over the place. I have served in women's ministry before. When I lived in Lubbock, I was able to be a lot more involved. And my husband and I used to teach a young singles Sunday school class as well. And so I've just loved on lots of different parts of this church. But
yeah, so you don't live in Lubbock anymore?
I don't. I live in Plainview, so I could drive up every Sunday, but it is so worth it to me. This is my church, and my daddy and I get to have Sunday school and church together and check in on each other, and so it's a good thing for me.
Yeah. Your family that are here.
Yes. I've been in this church for a long time. I was actually married here in 1998, so I just feel like this is home for me. So it's worth the drive.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us about early childhood. Were you raised in a Christian home or not?
I was. My mom and dad are both strong believers. My dad was not raised Christian. My mom was a preacher's daughter, so she was definitely raised in a Christian home. But my dad came to know the Lord while he was in the service, and then they met and married in a church, and he ended up coming to Plainview to study at Wayland, and I was born right at the end of his time there. So I was raised a little bit in Lubbock, and then we moved to Fort Worth for my dad to go to seminary.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when did you come to know the Lord?
I was 8, and it was at VBS, which is, every time Pastor David talks about how important VBS is, I know that too, because that was my time.
Yeah.
I was raised around it, but I think that's when I finally just had that knowledge that it was my time to make that decision. So being around a mom and dad who loved Jesus was a good part of that, but that was the nudge for me.
Yeah. So then from 8 years old until, I guess, graduating high school, how was your walk with the Lord in like those early years in teenagehood?
Yes, I would say that they were really good. I was in a really strong youth group in our church, and we did so many things together. There's lots of good community. I never felt like I wanted to try a lot of those things that some of the others at my school were doing. And I had a great group of Christian friends that we just all were like, we were okay to be uncool together and do the things that we wanted to do, which was hang out at church, and hang out at youth group. Those were my friends. That was my family. And I think that was so good for me because it was a community that supported the fact that you didn't have to do all those other things that everybody wanted to do. So I was not interested much in all those things.
The blessing of a strong youth group is pretty awesome.
Yes.
My husband is from a really, really small town, and even they had, like, though going to church on Wednesday nights was like what you did. Even a bunch of teenagers that maybe didn't go on Sunday mornings or their parents didn't go, like they had that at least once a week. They were in the church Wednesday night because the youth group was so strong, and that was the pull. So just hearing stories of youth groups is like, they're important. They're important for that teenage, those years of development. Having a strong community with that. So it's awesome that you got to have that.
Yeah.
And then what happened after high school?
So my parents, we moved the summer before my senior year of high school. We moved from Fort Worth to Albuquerque. Totally change of venue.
Change of scenery.
Very much. Total culture shock for me.
Yeah.
But I can make friends with the wall, so I figured it was okay. I was going to leave for college in a year anyway. So for me, it was just a year early, and I got a different set of friends. But we also got to reconnect and really invest in the lives of an aunt and uncle that I had not really grown up around, and that are not believers. Well, they may be now, but there was a great chance for us to really minister to them and for them to mend some relationships there. So we know now why God took us there. But that was just a year. And then I came to Wayland for college, came back. My dad had gone there. My granddad had gone there. And I had grown up looking at the yearbooks and thinking, what a cool place this looked like. Of course, it was the 70s, so everything was a little bit sketch. But I loved that atmosphere. I loved being at a Christian college where I knew I could live out my faith. And for me, it was a real time of making my faith my own. When you do grow up in a Christian home, there's sometimes that rote routine of, you get up and go on Sunday morning because that's what your mom and dad do. I never rebelled against that, but when you get to college, you really do have to make it. Am I going to go on Sunday mornings because I want to be there and not because someone is making me, or my mom's going to call and ask me, did I go to church? I need to be there because I want to be there. So it was really a time for me, kind of a crisis of faith. Not that sounds bad, but just a time to really figure out what I believed in and who I wanted to be. And that, yes, this life of faith was absolutely what I wanted to still live. So college was such a formative time, and that's why I love those years. That's why I'm at a university now working there, because it is such an important time for people to really solidify where they feel with the Lord or come to know him for the first time. And that's why I love what I do, and I love Christian education. So
awesome. What did you graduate with?
So my degree is in English and in journalism. I tell everybody I wrote my way all the way through college, but loved every minute of it. And got really involved at Wayland. It's a small place, so it's a place where they know you and they love and care about you. And they gave us opportunities to really spread our wings and to try things we'd never tried before, and to be just very bold in what that wanted to do. I always wanted to be a newspaper reporter, and I got so many opportunities there that I wouldn't have had at a bigger school, so that was really great. Got my very first big girl job out of college in Weatherford, and I was a little feature writer and photographer, and it was so much fun. But it was great to be able to tell people stories. I love feature writing because just like this, you just get to tell people stories. And I was always the crazy, Christian reporter that would say, well, does faith play into your story at all? Because if they brought it up and I brought it out of them, then I could share that in the paper and let them also share their own faith story.
Yeah.
And in the places I've worked, that was Bible Belt enough that it was acceptable. Yeah. But I think that's always, to me, a way to pass my faith through them and let them tell their faith story too.
Man, that's awesome.
It's fun.
So you're in Weatherford. And then what happens?
So I was in Weatherford for only 6 months. I was making next to no money. I was loving life. My parents were in Arlington now at that point. They're back in the Metroplex, so very close to home. I was getting to cover the Dallas Cowboys on Sundays.
Super cool.
So fabulous. I know. Sitting on the sideline taking pictures of the Dallas Cowboys. It was really surreal. As a right out of college girl, I loved every minute of it, but I was making nothing. And the newspaper in Plainview, where I had interned as a student, called and said, we have an opening. We want you back. And y'all, this will date me, but when they said $7.75 an hour, I was like, sold, because that was like good money back then and way more than what I was making. So I was like, okay. And I knew the paper, I knew the community. So I moved back to Plainview, and worked there for about 2.5 years, and then just felt God calling me kind of somewhere else. I just had a breakup. And it was just like, I just felt like I needed a change of scenery. I had a friend who worked at the Avalanche Journal here in Lubbock and said, they have a feature writer opening, you should apply. And I was like, well, I'll come talk to him. And I ended up taking the job, which it was a great thing to work at a bigger paper. At that point, I was not a photographer anymore. I was just a feature writer. Loved every second of it. I would still do it if you could make any money in journalism anymore. The field has changed so much, but I still love it. And I just, like I said, I love telling people stories and sharing those things. I had some amazing times at the AJ, but the most important thing probably about that was it brought me to Southcrest as a member. I had come back and forth over the years, seeing my grandmother lived here, and we would come to Southcrest and visit her. So I feel like I knew the church, but I was never a member until I moved back in 97 and became part of an amazing, crazy singles group. We were all God's children just packed in one room, and it was so much fun. We would have game nights and all that. And I met my husband in the singles group, like all good Baptist girls do. And we married here in 98. And so that was a super fun time for me. I was doing what I loved. We were putting him through college and finishing him at Tech, and just loving life as newlyweds. And then God decided to step in again and call us out. And so at that point, someone had called and said, well, they have an opening for a PR director at Wayland, and I put your name down that you should talk. They should talk to you. And I was like, okay. I did not want to leave. I loved Lubbock. I loved my church. I loved all the things. But Tommy had just finished his degree, so he felt like it was a good time. And so I said, well, I'll go hear him out. And the money was so good, we couldn't pass it up. And I don't ever take a job for money, but it just felt like, hey, I could do what I do every day and love doing every day for my own university. Like, what a cool opportunity. We were young marrieds, and we thought, hey, we could get a little house. Maybe we'll stay here 5 or 6 years, and then we'll move somewhere else. And I'm still there. Except for 2 years in the middle where we went on the mission field in Ohio, I am still at Wayland. I have many different jobs that I had to begin with, but love the place. And like I said earlier, I love that college age and how important it is, and I love what I do. So I guess I'm a lifer. I never thought I would be a lifer, especially in Plainview, Texas, but I love it.
That's so fun,
And yeah,
though.
so it's fun.
Yeah. Could you dive in a little bit more of like when you felt like God was moving and how you could differentiate between maybe just opportunities that you think that the Lord has a hand in? Like
Yeah.
how would you describe that? Especially with like working with college kids, we get a lot of people that are like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. How am I supposed to know this is from the Lord? Like how would you talk to them
Yeah.
about like discerning that?
I think for me, it's that I've never sought out those opportunities. They've always sought me out. I tell people I had a resume that was like 10 years old because I'd never had to turn a resume into someone. They would call
Yeah.
me. And I don't know. I've always just tried to listen to the Lord. And, when someone calls you and says, come talk to us, okay, I'll talk to you. And I don't know. There was just something about how everything kind of fell together and the timing of everything. It was like, if it had been a month earlier, we couldn't have done it because Tommy was in school.
Sure.
But he had just finished a degree and we kind of had this opening and it was a time to kind of branch out and get on our own. He'd never lived anywhere outside of Lubbock. I lived all over, but
Yeah.
so it wasn't new for me, but it was a chance to be at a place that was different for us. And he fell in love with the Christian education aspect of it too. And we did college ministry at Wayland. And so we just, I don't know. There was something about just how we just had absolute peace about everything fell together well.
Yeah.
I've always said if you feel like you're having to knock a door open, it's probably not the opportunity for you. But when it comes knocking on your door, sometimes I just can't help but go, okay, God, what are you doing with this? Like, okay, we're going to trust you. And, if it's not the thing to do, you go do something else. But I feel like as long as you're doing whatever he asks you to do, wherever you're going, he's going to bless that and effort. And he's going to either open a door for something else or open bigger doors for you. And that's exactly what he's done. I feel like I've just walked through every door he's opened for me and just been like, okay, God, what's next?
Man, I love that mentality on live. I just think that's so wonderful. So you mentioned very briefly that y'all were called to the mission field.
Yeah.
How did y'all get there?
So this was through an organization called Athletes in Action. It's actually an arm of Campus Crusade or Crew.
Okay, yeah.
And but this was specifically honed with sports ministry. And my husband was an avid sports fan. Like I cannot tell you how many hours and hours of sports we watched in our home. And so the fact that we could marry sports with ministry, and especially with college students, they minister very heavily on college campuses to athletes, sort of like FCA, but a little bit of a different level. And then also with pro teams. But the fact that we could do what we love to do, which is communications, he was a radio guy, and promote an organization that's such a cool gospel organization just really appealed to us. So we put in an application and we walked down that road. I think for me, that was a huge time of growth in my faith in God, because I'm very much a, yes, I trust you, Lord, but I'm going to do it over here on the side just in case you're not going to do it kind of a gal. And when you go in the mission field and you have to raise your own support and sit in front of people and say, would you please minister through us and support us in ministry, it's very humbling and it's very daunting to look at what you have to raise and go, okay, and think there's no way that'll ever happen. But to sit in front of people and have people that you thought, well, these are good friends, but they won't do anything. Say, we could do 100 a month with that help and go, oh my gosh,
Yes, that helps.
But it was such a faith stretcher for us to go on the mission field because, yes, it was just Ohio, although I jokingly call it foreign missions because that is such a different world too. But it was a great organization to work for, very good at discipling their people. Even though we're all believers, they believed in continuing to disciple us. So we actually went through classes where we worked on our faith development. We read books and we had mentorship groups together. And I love that because it was like I was also pouring into ministry, but they were pouring into me. That was a huge time of growth for me and just trusting the Lord that he would provide, even though we didn't know from time to time and it was a little sketchy. It was a little scary. We went from two salaries to one that was less than mine.
Yeah.
and we were living in a place where the cost of living was a little higher, but God laid all of that out so perfectly that it just had to be him. And it was a great time for us to get away a little bit from home and be totally on our own and just have to trust him 100%. And we did. And it was super fun. But when that ran out, we came back home, and I ended up jumping right back to Wayland, but on the fundraising side, which is also a totally different world. But I have loved every minute of it.
Yeah. So the transition from working at Wayland, before the mission field, into the mission field, was that like a hard decision, or did y'all know that that's where the Lord needed you because you were so engulfed and happy with working at Wayland in the first place?
And I'm glad you said that, because at first it was like God had to pry my cold, dead hands off of it, because that was so my identity, was what I did at work. That was who I was. And it was like he had to say, no, your identity is you're mine, and I'm using you for ministry, and I can do that wherever. It may not be here forever. You need to let go of that and hold things really loosely. And since then, that's what my big lesson has been, to hold things loosely. He can move you and use you wherever. So yeah, it was a little hard for me at first, but it was something Tommy really wanted to do. And so I was like, sure, well, that'd be great.
Yeah.
With a little bit of trepidation going in it. I was a little bit like, this is my world. This is my security blanket. But I think he needed me away from that security blanket to say, I can use you where you are, and your identity is not in your work. Your identity is as me. I'm your identity. And then your work is just cake. It's icing on top of that. Wherever I plug you in, I'm going to use you if you're obedient. So I think it was for us a test of obedience. Could we walk away from a good salary and a home and lots of security and a ministry we were loving, to give it all away to go do something different that was a little out of our comfort zone? So it was really good.
Did you know it was going to be 2 years?
We didn't. You'd sign up expecting that it would be at least 2 years.
Okay.
But really, whether you continue depends on just if God continues to provide and you continue to work and you continue to love it. And we did love it, but we were seeing our support kind of get less and less and less. And I tell people, I did not major in math at Wayland, but I know that if you take more out of your checking account a month than you put in, that is not going to end well. Yeah. At some point, that will not work. And so we kind of figured like the writing was on the wall, and we had come home actually in April to visit a bunch of family and friends, to see a bunch of our supporters, to visit our church, which Southcrest was also supporting us monthly, which was fabulous. But we just met with a lot of people, and we were losing some support. It was like going backwards, and we just went, we can't continue this. And so we figured we just needed to probably draw it to a close, that maybe God was saying, that's okay. That's what I had you here for. I did what I needed to do, and now I'm moving you on. And as it turned out, that was probably for the best, because that was about when my husband started having some health issues. So being back home, being around our doctors and in a place where we were comfortable and with family all here, all of our family was in Lubbock at the time. I think it was his timing that was what he needed us to do, was pull us away out of our comfort zone and then pull us back to where we needed to be for what was about to be a pretty bumpy journey.
Yeah. You came back to Plainview.
We actually came back to Lubbock.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we rented our home in Plainview out. We had rented it when we left. We couldn't sell it. It was just a bad market. We just rented it out, and there were renters in it, so we just left renters there, and we lived in Lubbock for a while, and I commuted to Plainview, which I don't love, but I did.
Yeah.
But it allowed us to plug back in with our church and really get back into the Southcrest family, which I loved. And that's when we started working with a singles group, and we got to be around our families much more. So that was it was a sweet time. I mean, you can look back now and go, God had every piece of it outlined, and he knew exactly why we needed to be where. That's hard in the front of it to trust looking forward, but man, hindsight is absolutely 2020, and you can see his hand upon all of it. It's just amazing.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so then y'all were in Lubbock until the most recent move back to Plainview.
Yes. So when I took the alumni director's job, I just said, we need to be back on campus. We missed being around students. We missed really being able to go to sporting events. And because it was, since we don't have kids of our own, those were our kids. We loved hanging around the kids, and we loved being at the games and all the stuff. And it's hard to do when you're getting in the car and jetting home and then not here on the weekends. So I said, we just need to move into our own home. And we still had a house there. So we told the renters to find something else, and no rush. and they found something quickly, and we moved back in quickly, and then we stayed in Plainview. So I've just stayed there. It's my community. It really is. I have community everywhere, but I've really been plugged into Plainview, and I love it. I love it there.
I love that.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer this question if it's uncomfortable. May I ask about the having children?
Sure.
If that was a decision or not?
No, that was not our decision. We tried. We tried a lot. And that was a huge time of growth for me too, because I was not handling that well. As a woman, especially at my age at the time, I was 26 when we got married. I was a little bit older, so we started pretty quickly after Tommy finished his degree. And it just wasn't happening. And, you feel like as a woman that that's what makes you whole, that you've got to have kids, that you have to do that. And so I was really struggling with a lot of it. I think both of us were, but hormones being what they are, mine were raging a little bit more loudly than his. And so it was really, really hard for me. And I actually met a stranger in an airport one day, and I don't know why, but for some reason, I guess God had her there. But I just ended up pouring my heart to this woman, and she was telling her about just frustration with it. And she said, "Have you ever thought about this, that, your college ministry, maybe those are your kids? At least right now. And maybe God does have a baby down the way. But if he doesn't, look at all the lives you're pouring into, more than if you had one little one at home that you had to focus on." And I had never thought about it that way. And it totally shifted my my mindset on that. And I was like, you're totally right. And so I just poured myself into those kids. That was my shift. And then it was actually a simulcast that we did of a Beth Moore study here at Southcrest, where she spoke about trust in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. But she flipped it around. I've never forgot this. She said, think of it as not the desires of your heart, but the heart of your desire. And at the time, that was my heart. My heart's desire was to be a mom. And I remember her saying, what is the desire of your heart? And I thought, I want to be a mom. Okay, what is the heart of your desire? Why do you want to do that? And I thought to myself, well, why do you want to do that? Because you want to impact future generations, right, for the Lord. And I remember her saying, are you doing that now? And I thought, oof, yeah. I mean, we had a college group of 30 kids at a tiny little country church in Plainview, Texas. And I was like, those are my kids. And after that, I had a complete peace that whatever God wanted to do was fine. If he wanted to give us a baby, great. If he wanted us to adopt, great. We walked down that road a little bit and didn't feel a peace about it, so we stopped. And we just said, God can do whatever. We're going to leave it in his hands. And he never chose to bless us that way, but I absolutely have no regrets, because my kids are hundreds of kids that we had over those years. And I still follow them on Facebook, and they have kids of their own. And those are like my little grandkids, although I'm nobody's grandmother. I love that those are generations of kids that we've been able to impact. And when my husband's funeral, there were kids that came back that had been our college students that drove back from Colorado and Midland and other towns that said, we had to be here because you influenced us so much. Man. And that to me is priceless. So no, I never had a kid of my own, but had lots of kids that we were able to pour into. And to me, that's much more important.
Man, when did your husband pass?
So Tommy died in March of 2024, March 17th, actually, St. Patrick's Day on a Sunday. He had 5 years of really hard kidney failure, dialysis for many years. He'd actually been on dialysis for 8 years total.
That's so tough on that.
So hard. Being a caregiver to me was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It was very hard. And I thought I had done hard things before then, but it was really hard because not only are you trying, I was working full time. He was on disability, so he wasn't able to work. But I'm working full time. I'm trying to keep a household going. I'm trying to do all the things I had to do and take care of him as well. It was very, very hard. But it built for me a compassion for people that are caregivers, because they often, I feel like, are very unseen. I tell people there were so many times that I would come to church on Sunday morning, because Tommy had been here since the 3rd grade. Everybody in this church knew him.
Yeah.
And they would ask me, how's Tommy? How's Tommy doing? How's Tommy doing? And sometimes I just wanted to scream out, what about me? Because I was just dying. I was dying on the vine. I was so exhausted and just mentally worn out from just grief. I grieved over every time something would happen in his journey. Like, he lost both of his legs. By the time he had passed, he was a double amputee. When he lost the first leg in 2020, I think I began grieving for him then. And in 2021, November of 21, I lost my mother very suddenly. And it was super unexpected. And so there was more grief on top of it. And I remember telling a counselor at one point, I think I'm just stuck in a cycle of grief. I can't get out of it. Every time I would take one step forward with his health, then we would take 2 steps back. And so I was grieving my mom. I was trying to take care of my dad, who was practically in a coma because he was so in shock of losing my mom. And then I just had all the things going on, and I wasn't handling life really well, honestly. And this was my big aha moment with God. About November 22, I was covering some things at the Baptist convention, and it was a crazy, crazy situation, but it was something God used to get my attention and just say, look, you've been telling me that you can't do this and you're having a hard time, but you're not listening to me. You're doing it all in your own strength. And I had to come to a place where I was like, God, I can't do this. You have got to do it for me. And he was like, yes, finally. Now I can work with you, It was a huge turning point for me to be able to say, okay, Lord, I'm going to hands off of this and just let you take it, because I cannot do it anymore. My strength was completely gone. It was way too much of the journey. And that was when I kind of came out of all that. I got back into some things. I wasn't doing bad things. I just was, some of those disciplines that are so important to your faith, I had kind of let go by the wayside in the busy of life and in the juggling of all that. So I'm a huge Christian music person. I love Air One and those kind of things because I want those kind of messages in my head. Yeah. And I'd started doing a lot of audiobooks, and so I wasn't listening to music that was putting my head in the right place. And it was like the Lord said, you need to get back to your Bible reading. You need to get back to studying the Word with others. And so I started a Bible study at work with women, and we started studying things together and just diving into the Word, and that really helped me. I put my radio back on Air One, and that was all I was listening to. I just needed those messages of the goodness of God and that He had this all the time. I just wanted that feeding in my brain. Yeah. It was a huge turning point for me. So I tried to be Superwoman and do it all. I could work full time. I could do this. I could do all those things and never miss a beat. But I was trying to do it all on my own strength, and I was failing miserably. And I was angry at God, and I didn't understand why I was having to go through all those things. Why would I have to lose my mom in the middle of this and all the things? I just was angry and really bitter. And it's like He got my attention and said, well, if you get back on track and do all these things, I think you'll find I've never left. You've moved away from me. And so I came out of all that just wanting that reminder of God's grace, that it's for me too. And I need to give myself that grace. So but God is my Ephesians 2:4-5, about, but God while we were still sinners. And I have to remind myself of that. He came while we were still sinners. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm never going to be perfect, but I can try, and I can give myself the grace. So that's my but God. And I try to remind every time anybody else sees it, I put it there so that I see it all the time.
Yeah.
But I wanted other people to see it. It's a great testimony that He's faithful in whatever we need Him to do. And the but God has changed. Sometimes there's lots of passages in the Bible that this comes up. And I love the one that says, my heart and my flesh may fail, but God is the strength. And there were lots of seasons of my life where that was my verse. The last year and a half probably of Tommy's life, that was my verse. I was out of gas. And if I had been doing it in my own strength, I just wouldn't have made it. I just needed Him every minute of every day. And it was like every morning it was, okay, Lord, I need strength for whatever you got for today. Just get me through it.
Yeah.
So it was a really long journey. The last 3 months of his life were in the hospital. And I would work from the hospital when he was in ICU. And then if they moved him to a regular room, I would go back to Plainview for the night and try to check on my dogs and get some rest and just live a normal life for a day or two. And then I would be back up here. I mean, it was constant for 3 straight months until he passed away. But it was a time for me of being able to let go of some of the grief because it had been so constant and so tiring. I didn't have to grieve him anymore. I knew where he was. I tell people I didn't start grieving my husband when he passed away. I really kind of stopped because I'd grieved for 4 years of all the things we would never do together, all the things he would never get to do, all the things he would never get to see. And so March 24 for me was the end of that because I could release him to the Lord. I knew where he was. I didn't have to grieve that he was gone because I knew where he was. And I knew that I had watched him suffer so much and I didn't have to do that anymore.
So what has life and community looked like since then?
Oh, gosh. Well, it's looked kind of great. I've loved just plugging back into church. Daddy and I jokingly say it used to be me and Daddy and all the widow people in our section in this church, and now it's me with all the widows because I'm one of them too. It's a different journey that you don't sign up for, especially at a young age. But God has allowed me to minister through that as well. In my work, I sit with a lot of donors and sit with a lot of people, and they tend to be a lot of older women who are widows. And so I've loved being able to sit across the table and hold the hand of an older lady and tell her I know what she's going through, especially if she's a brand new widow. And I have a very, very good friend who her her husband was practically like my second dad, and he died last November. And I was able to sit with Miss Deb and say, I know how you feel, and literally know how she feels, and be able to hug on each other. Like I said, it's a club you never want to join, but it's amazing the opportunities that God's given me to minister through that, just for me to hold my hands open and say, use me however you want, Lord. I will speak of your goodness however you want me to use it. Just use me and put me where you want. And he's put me in front of some amazing people to be able to minister to, and that's been amazing. I love that in my work. I love that our work is not just about money. It is about fundraising, but it's about relationships. And those relationships to me mean more than anything, is building those relationships that have kingdom purpose. And so I try to do kingdom work every time I can.
Yeah.
And then this summer I had a total shift of things I did not expect on my 2025 bingo card. I thought this was my year to move forward. And in June, I found out that I had cancer in my kidney. I was actually trying to donate a kidney to a coworker, and the very last thing I'd gone through all the stages, all the testing, all the things, and I was a great match, and it was so exciting to me that I was going to get to do this and help this woman, because I could never do that for my husband, but I could help her. Wow. And I was so excited about that. The very last thing I had to do was spend a day at the transplant hospital in San Antonio, for some very last minute testing, and to meet with all the people, apparently, including a psychologist, to make sure that you're not loony, I guess.
Yeah.
Which the odds are still out on that one. But I did. I met with all the people. We were talking about planning the transplant surgery. We were talking about all these things. It was going to be great. I was so excited about that. And then I left there. Well, the very last thing they did, and they blew it off like it was kind of a no big deal. So I kind of blew it off like no big deal. We're going to do a CT scan of your abdomen. No big deal. Just a precautionary thing. Okay. We were planning all the things. I left there and went to College Station to do some work visits. The next day I was leaving right after lunch to drive back home for 7 hours. And I had all these phone calls on my phone, and I'm like, who is calling me? And I looked and I realized it was the San Antonio hospital. So I returned the call, and he said, Teresa, I've got to tell you, we found a huge mass on your right kidney that might be cancer. You need to get it checked out. And I was like, excuse me? So, I mean, talk about a 180.
Yeah.
Now I have 7 hours to drive down the road and overthink all the things, because I will. And I remember thinking, I don't even know how I'm supposed to feel about this news. Like, I remember him saying, it's really a good thing that you were doing this donor process, or they never would have found it. So it was perfectly encapsulated in my kidney. It was not in my blood work. I'm manic about my blood work and my checkups with my doctor. And I had just had one in January, and everything was beautiful. I've lost a bunch of weight. And he was like, you're the picture of health. So to hear this was like, what just happened to me? And I remember thinking when I hung up the phone, I don't even know how to feel about this right now. Like, the part of me that's human wants to freak out. Cancer? Hold on.
Yeah.
The part of me that's a believer wants to be like, no bigs. But I was somewhere in the middle, and I just did not know how to feel. So I remember that I thought, I've got to call my daddy. I've got to call my boss. I've got to call all these people. But I just wanted a minute with God. And I thought, I just don't know how to feel. And I was really torn here before I took this huge long drive. And so I had found a Christian station the night before. And I remember I just stuck the phone in my lap, and I reached forward and I turned the volume up. And the minute I said it, I just went, Lord, I need to hear from you. You've got to give me a word. And when I turned the music back up, it was like the song, literally like someone dropped a pin on a record player, because the song started immediately when I turned it up. It was a song I hadn't heard in 5 years, and probably couldn't have said the words to you if you had sold a gun to my head. But I remembered the song. I just didn't remember the words.
Yeah.
And it starts out, I remember how you told me that life may not be easy, but everything I need, you've already given me. And I was like, all right, eh? And then it says, I remember how you told me I could trust you completely, so why would I doubt you when I know that you fight for me? And I remember just thinking, okay, Lord, that's the word. And then the chorus says, "You've walked me through fires. You've pulled me from flames. As long as you're with me, I won't be afraid. When the smoke billows higher and higher and I feel like I can barely breathe, I'll walk through this fire because you're walking with me." And I remember I literally looked up and I just went, okay, Lord. And I had 100% peace about the whole thing. I knew no matter what happened, I was walking with him. And I don't know that I could have said that 3 years earlier in the place I was. So he's brought me so far to just be like, okay, it's another hiccup in the road, but you've got this, Lord. And I had a peace about it. Wow. And I remember I cried through the rest of the song, but it was more like a prayer of cry of gratitude to the Lord that he gave me 100% peace about it. And then I called my dad, and then I called my boss, and I called my doctor. And my doctor said, we'll get you in with a urologist. And I met an amazing Christian man who did my surgery. That I met him on July the 1st, and my surgery was on July the 23rd.
Wow.
And we did it quickly. It was 4.5 inches big. It was completely contained, but it was cancer. It was a fast-growing, very silent kind of cancer, 0 symptoms whatsoever. So if I hadn't been doing that process to find it, it would have probably not found it until it was starting to kill me. So it was stage 2 kidney cancer. They removed the entire kidney, so I'm 1 kidney down, but they didn't want to disturb it, so the surgeon took the entire kidney out, and I am in great shape. I've healed well, and I attribute it all to, number one, that I had put some time into my health, because that was very important to me, is putting some time back into me and being healthy, and also that just listening to the Lord and being obedient. Everybody was like, why would you donate a kidney? And I'm like, well, because I could, and I thought it was a good thing to do. I just had a super huge push from the Spirit to do it. And I just walked down that road and followed him the whole way. And now I know why, because I wouldn't have found it if it wasn't for that process.
That's incredible.
It's crazy, incredible. Yeah. But I just say that's the goodness of the Lord. I trust him with everything because he's proven that he can be trusted. And I have people all the time say, you're such a strong person. Like, you're such a strong person. And I'll say, no, I'm not. But God is strong and he's bigger than me. And if I don't tap into that strength every single day, I won't have it. And I can tell the days that I fly through it without doing anything spiritual, and I struggle all day long. So I started in January with reading through the Bible every day through the Bible app. I use the Bible recap. Yeah. I realized I was 52 years old and had never read the Bible through end to end, and that's horrible. And I was like, nope, this is going to be my year to do that. So that's been a great thing for me too, to just get back into the Word in a different level and to see God's faithfulness through the whole story. I see the but God so much clearer when you literally see it, Old Testament to New Testament. You can just see God weaving through the story of how gracious he's been to us. Oh my gosh, we have so messed up. And the world now is even more twisted. But God's grace is just so sustaining. And so
I've thoroughly enjoyed just hearing your story and what the Lord has brought you through and your attitude about it all.
I'm convinced that attitude is 90% of the battle. And in fact, my surgeon said that. He said, you're healthy going into this surgery, and you have a great mindset that this is just a blip on your screen. God's got this, and then you have things to do. So I told him, whatever God's got through this for me to learn, I'm going to learn it, and then I'm going to go on with life because I got bigger and better things to do. I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm just going to say God was good, and I'm going to move down the road. So he's got lots of work for us to do. We can't dwell on that. So I just say thank you for the opportunity for life to continue for me, and I'm back down the road. That's the biggest thing for me, is just that obedience to me is not easy all the time. And I have to check myself at the door all the time because I'm such a headstrong, independent kind of girl that I've got this. And I do have to check myself all the time and go, no, God's got this. And he's got you if you'll let him. He had to get a hold of me kind of in a painful way to do that. But at the end of the day, it's kind of, I remember a C.S. Lewis quote that I love when he says that pain is God's way of waking up a deaf world. And that sometimes your pain are like the blows of a chisel. They can feel really painful as you're getting them. Those blows can hurt so much. But at the end of the day, the chisel is making you into a masterpiece. God's making you into a masterpiece that looks like him. But you have to be there and let the chisel kind of hit at you every now and then. So My friend and I have a personal saying. Our favorite saying is, God never wastes a hurt. And so when you have something you go through, it's always for who can I minister to through that? God gonna open me up that I can minister to? So it's really hard to do that. It's taken me 53 years to get to a place where when blips in the road come, I can say, okay, Lord, what are you going to show me through this? What are you going to teach me through this? And who are you going to minister to through me? I just want to minister through whatever he gives me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Being vulnerable and telling your story. And I know that it's going to touch so many
I hope so.
women in this church. We're grateful for you.
Absolutely. I'm glad to do it. Grateful to the Lord.
We'll see y'all next time.